Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and welcome to Rebooted MCU Phase 3 Part 4. We're reaching the end here, so we're not even going to take any more time to do an introduction. Let's jump right in to the 9th project of Rebooted MCU Phase 3. The 9th project of Rebooted MCU Phase 3 is Avengers Infinity War. The movie opens up with a Nova soldier lying down in bed, fast asleep. All of a sudden we hear an explosion and someone yells, "Ryder, get up! All soldiers report to battle!" As we subsequently hear more screaming and terror, Richard Ryder, played by Glenn Powell, sits up in his bed sweating. We see him run and begin to put on his uniform, and as he does, we see that he is a corpsman, the lowest ranking of all the Nova Corps. We see that he begins rummaging around his room looking for his helmet, which he cannot find. When he realizes he can't find it, we see him run outside the room and we see that Xandar is being decimated. He runs throughout the battlefield as we see members of the Black Order, including Ebony Maw, Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, and Cull Obsidian, killing random inhabitants of Xandar and other Nova soldiers. We also see the Outriders running around, destroying everything in their path. Ryder becomes startled and finds a bunch of rubble to hide under. As he does, we see Drax the Destroyer, played by Dave Bautista, go flying across the battlefield. We see that he looks beaten, and as he attempts to get up, we see a large, formidable figure walking towards him. The figure is revealed to be Thanos, voiced by Josh Brolin, who says to him, "Is this the best the Nova Corps has? Come on!" As we see Drax struggle to fight Thanos, he eventually knocks him out cold. We cut to Nova Prime, played by Glenn Close, standing in her office as she sends out a distress signal to the rest of the galaxy. Thanos bursts into the room and says, "Nova Prime, I consider myself to be a gracious soul. I go away for years only to return to complete my destiny, and you choose to attempt to prevent me from achieving it?" Nova Prime looks at him, see that she is holding the orb that houses the Power Stone. Leave the fate of the galaxy to a monster? I'd rather die. Thanos chuckles. Poor choice of words. As we cut to the outside of the Nova Prime Hall, we hear Nova Prime scream. We see that the Black Order and Outriders have gathered up all the remaining citizens of Xandar and Nova Corps members and are holding them in a position. As Thanos walks out, we watch as Ebony Maw hands him the Infinity Gauntlet, and Thanos places a Power Stone into the first slot of the gauntlet. No one being in the universe has possessed the power of the Infinity Stone like you, my lord. Now, what do we do with these pests? We see Thanos looking up at the sky. Kill them. I believe I have an old friend to visit. We see the Statesman sitting in the sky above Xandar, the ship that is housing the Asgardians. As Thanos walks away, we see Richard Ryder hiding under the rubble as he watches the remaining members of the Nova Corps and Xandar get killed by the Black Order. We cut to inside the Statesman. We see red lights flashing as Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson, boards an escape pod along with Korg and large members of Asgardians. Are you sure about this, my king? She says, as we see Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, who looks nervous, saying, Yes, it will be a short battle. Nobody can stop the God of Thunder. When we are finished, we will catch up with you. As the escape pod is sent away, we hear an explosion as creatures enter the ship and the title card pops up. Following the title card, the battle on the Statesman plays out most of the same as it does in the actual movie, except there is no Hulk. Thanos is easily able to defeat Thor, Loki, Heimdall, and the remaining Asgardians. We see Loki die attempting to prevent Thanos from getting the Space Stone. When Thanos has acquired the stone, we watch as Thor cries in agony over the death of his brother. We then see Heimdall's eyes light up bright yellow as he begins to scream. I speak to the one who presides in the sanctum, friend of our king, the God of Thunder. Thanos is coming. Protect the stones. He has beaten the Asgardians, but he cannot win. The galaxy is in your hands. As he says this, we watch as Thanos walks over and stabs Heimdall in the chest, killing him. We cut to Earth where Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, Wong, played by Benedict Wong, and Bruce Banner, played by Mark Ruffalo, are all eating sandwiches as they watch the yellow projection of Heimdall's face quickly cut away Strange looks at Banner, who says, "This can't be good." We see Tony Stark, played by Robert Downey Jr., walking in the park with Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, as they discuss their wedding. Strange opens up a portal and requests that Tony follow him. Tony initially refuses until he sees Banner, who gives him a hug. They return to the Sanctum, where Strange explains what the Infinity Stones are to Tony, and both Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian arrive on Earth. Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Wong, and Hulk fight the duo, with the Hulk still having issues regarding his mental block, which makes the battle with Cull Obsidian much more difficult. We cut to Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland, riding on a bus when his Spidey sense activates, and Ned distracts the bus as Peter suits up in his Spider-Man suit and joins the fight. Wong transports Cull Obsidian to a different part of the world as we watch Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Spider-Man, who has now been given his Iron Spider armor, climb aboard the Q ship with Ebony Maw. Hulk reverts back to his Banner form and looks at Wong and asks, "What should we do?" Wong looks at Banner and says, "The other stone, do you know where it might be?" Banner thinks and says, "Oh gosh," as we see him reach into his pocket and quickly shoot someone a text. We cut to a ship traveling through space at hyperspeed. We see that Reed Richards, played by Keanu Reeves, is piloting the ship. Sue Storm, played by Amanda Peet, is sitting in the passenger seat. Johnny Storm, played by Andrew Garfield, is listening to music, and Ben Grimm, otherwise known as The Thing, voiced by Jason Sudeikis, is sleeping. Reed comments to Sue, "I hope the distress signal sent out by Nova Prime isn't a big deal." As the ship exits hyperspeed, we see the remains of a ship floating around Xandar and the wreckage of Thanos and the Black Order. Johnny stops his music and hits Ben, who wakes up grumpily and says, "What?" As Ben says this, we see the body of Thor hit the windshield of the ship, and Johnny screams. Reed tells Sue to land the ship on Xandar and prepare for immediate medical attention to be given. As the team lands, we see Reed administering aid to Thor, who wakes up and looks at the team and asks, "Who the hell are you guys?" Reed explains who they are and asks Thor what happened. Before Thor can answer, we see Richard Rider knocking on the ship. Hello? Is anyone in there?" Thor, the Fantastic Four, and Rider walk around Xandar as Rider explains what happened. We watch as Thor walks towards the Grand Hall when suddenly we hear a cough and Thor shouts, "Drax!" We see Drax the Destroyer lying on the ground. While he is injured, he survived the bout with Thanos. Drax explains that Thanos is known as the Mad Titan, and he hails from the planet Titan, and he is traveling around the universe collecting the Infinity Stones for some plan to balance the universe. Drax further explains that his family was killed by Thanos years ago, but since then he went into hiding. But now that he has obtained 2 of Infinity Stones, there might be no way to stop him. Johnny looks around and says, "So, what can we do?" Thor chimes in, "I'm going to Nidavellir, the home of the dwarves. They can construct a weapon capable of killing Thanos. I just need to find a way to get there." Thor exclaims, Oh, we can use the Nova too. I'm actually a pilot in the Nova Corps, so I can get you there, if you want." Thor nods and says, "Thank you, kind warrior. Destroyer, will you be coming with us as well?" Drax says, "If it means I can stop that monster from hurting anyone else, I'm in." Sue looks at Thor and says, "So what should we do then?" Thor responds, "If you truly are as fantastic as you say, perhaps going to Titan to see if you can gather any of the already collected stones might be wise." Reed looks at the team and says, "Based on what it sounds like, we are no match for this Thanos. We might just need to head back to Earth and strategize there." Ben chimes in, "Now hold on now, Stretch. Remember what I said we got these powers for a reason? Maybe this is it. Sure, we might not be a real match for this guy, but you're the smartest man alive. You always figure out a plan to fix our messes. Maybe it's time the smartest man saves the world." Sue and Johnny nod in agreement. Reed pauses and says, "Okay then, Fantastic Four, let's head to Titan." We cut back to Earth, and we see Vision, played by Paul Bettany, sitting in the Avengers HQ reading a book, when suddenly we see darkness overtake the outside of the HQ. Vision looks up and says, "Colonel Rhodes, is that you?" Suddenly, Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight attack Vision, and he screams. We see James Rhodes, played by Don Cheadle, run upstairs and suit up in an attempt to fight off the Black Order. While he is able to help, they still manage to fend off both Vision and War Machine. Suddenly, we see Proxima Midnight get hit from behind with electric darts. The camera pans to reveal Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans, and Natasha Romanoff, played by Scarlett Johansson, standing there, and they join in the fight. The four are able to overpower the Black Order, which causes them to retreat, but as they do, Corvus Glaive warns, "This is but a mere reprieve from the storm that is coming." The four look at each other and Vision says, "Captain Rogers, Miss Widow, it appears that the universe is in trouble." We cut to the Sanctuary, speeding through space, where we see Nebula, played by Karen Gillan, driving as she shouts, "I told you we should have taken the Reality Stone last time we visited the Collector." We see Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana, gathering up weapons. I know, but I thought that carrying around one Infinity Stone and knowing the location of two others would sort of make us prime targets. Even more so than we already are. Ronan, played by Lee Pace, is sitting and laughs. "Not like it would make much of a difference. Father will still achieve his destiny all the same." Gamora takes out her sword and aims it at Ronan. "Another word from you, brother, and your head will be on the ground next to Thanos when I'm done with him." Nebula looks back but continues driving. Ronan sits back. "Well, sister, I guess I'm still confused as to why you hate Father so much." Gamora pauses and explains that when she was a girl, Thanos slaughtered her entire race, including her parents, and adopted her as his own. She says that while he might think he is achieving peace for the galaxy, he does not realize his vision requires him to become the very thing he hates, a ruthless killer. Nebula looks back and says, "Two jumps away from nowhere." Gamora notes, "And one more thing. Regardless of what happens, nobody can tell him about what we found on Vormir. If it comes to it, die before he gets it out of you. We can't let him win." We then see the ship arrive at nowhere, and we see that the Sanctuary too has already arrived. Nebula quietly says, "He is here." Gamora grabs her stuff and says, "Ronan, you're going to stay with the ship. Any funny business, and I'll kill you. Nebula, let's go." Nebula nods as she and Gamora exit the ship and enter the Collector's Museum. As they enter, we see Thanos place a Reality Stone on his Infinity Gauntlet and says, "Power, space, reality. My daughters, do you really think you're going to be the ones who get in the way of my plan?" He turns around to look at Gamora and Nebula, who both attack. While they both put up a formidable fight, they are no match for him. Thanos grabs Nebula by the neck and says, "Gamora, my favorite daughter, I have a source that told me you know where the location of the Soul Stone is." Gamora stands in silence as Thanos begins tightening his grip on Nebula's neck. "Tell me, Gamora, or I will kill your sister." Nebula looks at Gamora, and as she is about to speak, Nebula manages to spit out, "No, don't. Remember, the galaxy." Gamora sheds a tear as Thanos begins squeezing Nebula's neck harder when all of a sudden we hear, "Vormir, Father, the Soul Stone is on Vormir," as we see Ronan run into the museum. "Please, Father, don't kill my sister. She doesn't deserve to die." Thanos places Nebula, who has passed out from the lack of air, on the ground and says, "Ronan, you are my biggest mistake, but you have proven yourself useful. Your compliance has saved your life and your sister's life this day." As we see Thanos punch Gamora, knocking her out, he grabs her and walks back to the ship. As he passes, he uses the Power Stone to destroy the Sanctuary. Once he enters the Sanctuary too, he says, "Full speed to Vormir." We watch as Ronan is angry and walks away as Nebula lies passed out in the museum. We cut back to Earth where we see Steve, Natasha, Rhodey, and Vision in a virtual conference with Thaddeus Ross, played by Harrison Ford, who says, "Due to the circumstances, we aren't going to raid the HQ, but you are still harboring two wanted criminals that have not authorized you or Vision to suit up for any reason, Rhodes." Steve stands up and says, "Ross, with all due respect, the universe is at stake here. You don't have any say in the matter. We will face the consequences later, but if you get in our way and attempt to stop us, well, you are on the same side as the monsters who attacked New York." Brody hangs up the phone as we see Bruce Banner walk in. Everyone looks shocked to see him as he says, "Sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to interrupt the call. Ross sort of has it out for me." Brody says, "Look, Bruce, about last time." Bruce chuckles, "Don't worry, it was a low blow. I won't let it happen again." Steve looks at Bruce and says, "Bruce, level with me. What are we up against here? Bruce explains what Doctor Strange had told him at the Sanctum and emphasizes that because Vision has the Mind Stone, he is in danger. Steve looks at Vision and says, "We will do everything we can. We are a team. We have been fractured, yes, but nobody will tear us apart." Vision says, "Well, I respect your commitment to me, Captain Rogers. The only way to prevent universal catastrophe is to find a way to destroy the stone." Rogers shakes his head. "No, we need to fight. Where is Hank, Janet, Clint? Is there anyone new since I've been gone?" Rhodes explains that following the airport battle, Hank, Janet, and Clint all took plea deals and are now under house arrest in order to avoid jail time, so they are off the table for now. Banner asks, "Is there anyone else we can turn to for advice?" Rogers looks at Natasha and Rhodey and says, "You know what, Bruce? I think I do know someone." We cut to the Q ship where the scene plays out exactly the same as it did in Infinity War. Ebony Maw is killed as Peter and Tony save Doctor Strange. Tony insists that they stay on the ship and allow the group to go to Titan so they can face Thanos. Doctor Strange explains that he holds the Time Stone and that his mission is to solely protect it, and that he will allow both of them to die if it meant preventing Thanos from acquiring it. We cut to the Nova 2, where Thor is explaining to Drax about what happened to Loki and his entire family. All of a sudden, we hear Richard Rider burst into tears as Thor asks, "Humble warrior, why do you shed tears?" Rider explains that he has been a coward since he was a boy, and instead of fighting back on Xandar, he hid while the Nova Corps members died, and now he is the only one left to continue on in the name of Nova. Drax is angry about how much of a coward Rider is, but Thor explains, "I was once like you, warrior. Scared." "Really?" says Rider. "No," chuckles Thor. "But if I was, I would have thought to myself, why did destiny allow me to survive? Why was I chosen to be the last of my kind? You are the sole Nova now. You can't change the past, but you can determine your future." Rider looks forward as Thor says that and says, "Prepare yourselves. We are about to arrive at Nidavellir." We see Rider walk away from the controls and into the part of the ship designated for Nova Corps soldiers. We see that he finds a Nova Centurion uniform and says, "As long as the Nova force is with me, let me do my best to make my brother's sacrifice worth it." We cut to Wakanda, where we see King T'Challa, played by Michael B. Jordan, Princess Shuri, played by Letitia Wright, Queen Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, and Okoye, played by Denai Guerrera, welcome in the Avengers. Steve thanks T'Challa for allowing them to come, and T'Challa says, "Well, we have put up a protective barrier around Wakanda, so we should have some sanctuary here." We then see Banner discussing the possibility of replicating the Soul Stone with the team in Shuri's lab, but Shuri explains that there is no force strong enough to replicate or destroy the stone known to man. Steve explains that Vision should remain hidden at all costs. All of a sudden, we see Okoye run into the lab and says, "Your Majesty, we have an issue." We see Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, Cull Obsidian, and Outriders all attempting to breach the protective shield around Wakanda. Natasha looks at T'Challa and says, "What do we do?" T'Challa says, "Gather the tribes, the Dora Milaje, the White Wolf, and get this man a shield." "The White Wolf," says Steve as we see Bucky Barnes, played by Sebastian Stan, walk into the lab and say, "I told you, Cap, I'm with you to the end of the line." The two hug as we cut away to Vormir. The Vormir sequence plays out almost exactly the same as it does in Infinity War. Red Skull tells Thanos about the sacrifice he must make, and he sacrifices Gamora in order to obtain the Soul Stone. As we hear Gamora hit the ground, Nebula wakes up on nowhere. We see her anger about what happened and how she wasn't strong enough to beat Thanos. We see her spot an old Ravager ship in the Collector's Museum. As she climbs aboard, she says, "It's time to go to Titan." We cut to the Q ship, where we see it land on Titan. As Strange, Parker, and Stark start discussing their plans, the ship is broken into, and we hear something shout, "It's clobbering time!" as the Fantastic Four break into the ship and begin attacking the three. After a few seconds of fighting, Reed shouts, "Stop!" and says, "You're Tony Stark. I must say I've read all about your suit. The thermodynamics are incredibly complex." The Fantastic Four explain who they are, and Stark says, "Well, I guess we're on a team now. Let's strategize." We see Reed, Tony, and Sue mapping out a plan of attack, while Peter, Johnny, and Ben talk about their favorite movies. Tony gets annoyed at how relaxed they are when he notices Doctor Strange meditating and seemingly looking terrified over and over again. Doctor Strange breaks out of the trance. Tony asks him what happened, and Strange explains that he looked into the future to see what possibilities of the upcoming battle he could see. And out of the 14,605 possibilities, there's only one where they were victorious. We cut back to Wakanda, where we see Steve Rogers, now with Wakandan shields, Black Widow, Hulk, War Machine, Bucky Barnes, Black Panther, the Dora Milaje, the tribes of Wakanda, the Jabari tribe with M'Baku, played by Winston Duke, standing together, facing the Wakandan border with the barrier keeping the Outriders out as we see them desperately trying to get in. All of a sudden, we see Namor, played by Raul Castillo, fly down next to Black Panther, who shakes his hand. Black Panther says, "Thank you and the Atlanteans for coming to our aid." Namor explains that he made a promise to T'Challa that he would help whenever Wakanda was in trouble, and Namor does not break his promises. In order to prevent the Outriders and Black Order from completely surrounding the perimeter, T'Challa orders the shield be opened narrowly at one entrance, and as the group prepares for battle, T'Challa screams, "Wakanda forever!" and the Battle of Wakanda begins. Thor, Nova, and Drax arrive on Nidavellir, where the scene progresses similarly to how it did in Infinity War. Eitri, played by Peter Dinklage, is unable to make Stormbreaker on his own, so Thor takes it into his own hands. Since Groot has not been introduced yet, Nova uses the Nova Force to create a hard-light construct in order to create Stormbreaker. Once the axe is complete, Thor uses a Bifrost to transport the three of them to Earth. When they arrive, we see the Outriders and Black Order beginning to overpower the Earth heroes, but Thor, Drax, and Nova arrive just in time to help with the fight. We cut to Titan, where Thanos arrives and has a conversation with Doctor Strange, where he explains his plan for the stones to wipe out half of all life in the universe so the other half can prosper. This leads to Thanos taking on Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four in battle. Nebula still crashes her ship into Thanos and joins the fight. As Doctor Strange, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, and the Thing attempt to restrain Thanos, Iron Man and Spider-Man attempt to pull the gauntlet off. Thanos is screaming as he reaches a new level of rage when Nebula asks him about Gamora. As we see Nebula get upset, Thanos has a flashback to when he first met Gamora as a little girl. He screams and breaks away from the group's attempts to restrain him. He then uses the Power Stone to destroy a moon of Titan and throw it at the team on the battlefield. We cut back to Wakanda, where we see the members of the Black Order get defeated. Hulk is struggling with his mental block, but becomes enraged when he sees Corvus Glaive attack Vision from Shuri's lab. He uses this strength to defeat Cull Obsidian. Proxima Midnight is defeated when Black Widow and Okoye team up. They also get a little help from Namor. Corvus Glaive attacks Vision, but he and Captain America team up to stop him. Back on Titan, we see Doctor Strange and Thanos face off against one another. Doctor Strange's magic manages to inconvenience Thanos, but does not do enough to so much as injure him. Thanos defeats Strange with a single punch. The fight between Thanos and Iron Man plays out the same way as it does in Infinity War. Thanos stabs Tony and agrees to spare his life after Doctor Strange gives him the Time Stone. Thanos then teleports to Earth as Johnny Storm asks Tony if they just lost. We see Vision injured as Thanos arrives on Earth and walks slowly towards him. Bucky, Cap, Natasha, Hulk, War Machine, Black Panther, Namor, Drax, and Nova all attempt to slow Thanos down. But their efforts are futile as he reaches Vision and breaks the Mind Stone out of Vision's skull, killing him. As Thanos places the final Infinity Stone on his gauntlet, we see the gauntlet start lighting up and massive power courses through his veins. Thor launches Stormbreaker at Thanos, and it hits him straight in the chest, even overcoming a blast from the Infinity Gauntlet. Thor lands in front of Thanos and says, "You die for that," as he pushes in Stormbreaker further. Thanos chuckles and says, "You should have gone for the head." As he snaps his fingers, he is brought back to when he first met Gamora. But instead of playing out like we saw earlier, she turns to him and says, "Was it worth it?" We are brought back to the present, where Thanos is sitting with a burnt hand as a result of using the Infinity Gauntlet. "What did you do?" screams Thor as Thanos teleports away. All of a sudden, we hear Bucky call out, "Steve?" as we see Bucky Barnes fade to dust. We cut to various heroes turning to dust, including Black Panther, Namor, War Machine, Drax, and Nova. We cut to Titan, where we see Tony, Peter, and the Fantastic Four huddled up. All of a sudden, Ben says, "Oh geez, Stretch," as we watch the Thing turn to dust. "Ben!" screams Reed. "Sis?" says Johnny as we watch Sue turn to dust. As she does, she says, "Reed, I love you." Reed looks shocked and turns to Stark, who says, "Steady, Richards," as we watch Mr. Fantastic turn to dust. Johnny screams and begins to cry. "Oh God," he shouts, "my family!" As Tony pats him on the back, we see him look to Doctor Strange, who says, "Tony, there was no other way." As we watch Doctor Strange turn to dust, finally, Peter walks up to Mr. Stark and says, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good." As we see Tony embrace Peter, we watch as Peter Parker turns to dust. We watch as Tony sits on the ground next to the crying Johnny Storm as Nebula says, "He did it." We then cut to Earth and see Captain America, Hulk, Black Widow, and Thor looking stunned at what just happened. And we finally cut to Thanos sitting on the outside of a small hut watching the sun set as the movie ends. We have a single post-credit scene where we see Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, walking down the street when suddenly cars start crashing into each other. As Matt begins to realize what is going on, we watch as he turns to dust. We then cut to a car near Cox, who is housing Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and Maria Hill, played by Colby Smulders, who both turn into dust, but not before Fury sends a message using some kind of pager that shows a familiar red, blue, and yellow pattern with the star as the screen fades to black. So that is Avengers Infinity War, the 9th project of Rebooted MCU Phase 3. And I think we're going to call it here today just because the next project is a rather long one. And I think that I want to try to add in a whole nother video so we can cover 2 projects in that video, because we have 4 projects remaining. So I'm going to try to do 2 in the next 2 episodes. So that means we'll cover 10 and 11 in part 5 and 12 and 13 in part 6. So thank you all for watching once again. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and leave your thoughts down below. I always enjoy reading the comments. But we'll see what happens to our heroes next time on Rebooted MCU. I'll see you all then.